trade back down. You did not mess with Bad News. Now, on some of the heels, Bad News Brown, that was Bad News Allen. He was an Olympic judo medalist in the 1976 Olympics. But Bad News Brown, he had so much, everybody idolized Bad News. Nobody with him. Gary Albright was there. Gary was just getting started. But Gary was an All-American at Nebraska. And Gary was just fucking huge. And he was sort of like the human suplex machine. And when I went to Calgary the first time, he was just sort of training, hanging out and whatever. But when I come back, he was a star. And he worked from the UWFI in Japan, and Gary was highly projected. He was a tough ass guy. I like Gary Albright. He used to come over to my place at the hotel at the St. Regis. He was always drinking. And I remember one night, we come back and we went out, and now this is a story. No, I shouldn't tell that story. I'll wait until I'm talking about Puerto Rico, because it happened in Puerto Rico. Then there's some stories I could be telling about Strangler Steve DeSalvo. Strangler Steve DeSalvo, he was trained by Red Bastien along with the Ultimate Warrior, along with Sting. Strangler Steve, well, hell, that story happened too in Puerto Rico. I'll have to wait on that one too. But he had about 22-inch arms. He was a badass. And he was always in a bad mood. But he would never fuck with me, and I could get him sort of laughing a bit. Now, Mike Shaw was a top heel there. And Mike had been there about 9 years. He was there as Muckin' Singh. And what he was like one of the relatives of Gamma Singh. Of course, Gamma was like Indian, and Mike was Muckin', but you could tell they weren't really brothers. But Gamma Singh was a guy very, very well respected. He could get guys booked on a lot of tours, east or west or whatever the hell, like Egypt and stuff like that. Like a lot of the Canadian boys, their big thing was to go to Japan, go to Germany, go to Austria, and which I got to do with all them, and I met those guys over there. They got to go a lot of Indian places and everything, and see the world. Now, Johnny Smith there, he was there as a heel, and he was Davey Boy Smith's real cousin, which was unusual. Abu Weasel was about 5'1", and his name was Malad Zine. He was over. He would get all the women because he dressed the little packy guy or whatever, but he was cool. Now the Cuban assassin who's there as Angel Ancevita. I met him the night I first wrestled in Oak Hill, West Virginia in 1977. And he actually lived in Oak Hill, West Virginia, but his wife was from Calgary. So Angel, he lived in Calgary. But Angel, I worked with him in Calgary. I worked with him in Oak Hill. I worked with him for Don Pruitt in Nashville before I worked for Nick Goulas. I worked for him in Kansas City in Bob Geigel. And I worked with him in Puerto Rico. So no matter where Angel Anceviti, the Cuban assassin, was, it seemed like Rip Rogers was always going there too. So we had a very, very, very good rapport. Some of the matches I remember that I was working with, I had a match against Chris Benoit.
Out of New Orleans, Goldie from Hollywood, and they're in against the championship combination.
And Chris, he said, "I like the way you wrestle. Can you teach me to work like you?" And I'm dumbfounded, because Chris Benoit was a great, great worker.
But it's no secret there is a growing rift between Idol and Benoit.
He had his own style. He was trained in Japan, where he was like a wrestling push-up squat machine. And all he ever wanted to talk about was wrestling. What I did, I come in with a bunch of carny shortcuts.
In the territory. For instance, I understand that you overheard Randy Thatcher
to get reactions of intensity and body language and facials and everything else. where Calgary was sort of like like a Japanese wrestling, because the Harts were so well respected in Japan. So it was, when I come out there, it was sort of funny and it sort of caught your eye. But me and Chris worked 30 minutes one night. He says, "Hey, can you teach me how to wrestle like you?" I said, "Chris, I should be asking you, can you teach me how to wrestle like you? Because you're a much better wrestler." He goes, "I know, but the people, they make a lot of noise when I'm in the ring." I said, "Chris, that's all shortcuts. Guys do shortcuts when they can't really wrestle the way you can anymore. So believe you me, stay where you're at. You've been trained great by the guys in Japan. You got a good attitude because Bad News has given you a great attitude. So believe you me, you're going to be a star. You're going to be a big star." And he was a big star, and he was a great worker. And when I knew Chris Benoit, he could hardly look you in the eye. He was so shy. When you were in Calgary, it was a place where there was ribs, and more ribs. So when you were at a hotel or after the show, all of a sudden somebody might be ringing your door and somebody ordered you $30 worth of ribs. You know, you were stuck with it, and that was sort of the norm. And in Calgary, if you fell asleep, which guys would often fall asleep because guys would have a habit there of taking Halcyon and putting it in your beer, and then you would pass out. And then when you would pass out, all of a sudden you'd wake up and your beard would be gone, or half of your beard be gone, or part of your mustache would be gone, or all your clothes you could be waking up in different clothes, or your clothes they were long pants and now they were short pants. So guys liked to rib in Calgary because you had a lot of time off. Brian Pillman became a major superstar after he left Calgary. Chris Benoit became a major player in the wrestling business when he left Calgary. The Dynamite Kid became a superstar, known worldwide, along with his partner, Davies Boy Smith. They all come from Calgary. They all sort of worked with the same style. They all become big-ass stars with WWE. But the thing that, looking back, where did they go to begin with? It all started out in Calgary. The great Bret Hart, WWE superstar. Where did he start? With his daddy. Owen Hart, where did he start? Owen was the baby of the family. The first match Owen had in WCW, he wrestled me.
Shoulder takedown. Over the top, Rogers. He's playing right now.
And I knew exactly what the great Owen Hart could do. I made him look like a superstar, and you knew he was on his way to superstardom. The main thing is he had all of his brothers before him. He had seen all the song and dance. When you're talking about WWE, you're talking about Calgary, you're talking about the same style, and you're talking about how Vince McMahon could sit and watch Calgary any week, and he could have his picking of anybody he wanted, and he picked a lot of guys out of there. The great Bad News Brown, who was Bad News Alan Coadge, he was handpicked out of Calgary. Bad News is one of the toughest motherfuckers in the world. Nobody messed with Bad News. Andre would not mess with Bad News. Andre backed down when it was time to mess around with Bad News. You did not mess with Bad News. Remember that trip we had when the van broke down? Remember when Dynamite went off, had fart spray everywhere? Remember when Davey Boy cut the sleeve out of his thing? So you got the memories. Remember when Bruce Hart was ribbing Brian Pillman, and then the guy smartened him up, so then he ribbed Bruce and he got him going and everything. If you got to wrestle in Calgary, Now I'm just thinking with the places where I've been: England, Austria, Germany, South Africa, Japan. I don't know how many times. Continental, Southeastern, Memphis, ICW, Southeastern, Kansas City. All these different places. The Maritimes. Out of all these places, the greatest time I ever had, the greatest time I ever had of anywhere I ever wrestled in the world was in Calgary wrestling under the great Stu Hart. The combination of the two vans, the combination of having Stu as a boss, the combination how they did their Saturday night TV, taped the whole thing, then it would be edited. So you get to see like a 3-hour show in 2 hours. How, and usually it was they would be taken up in the ring where the baby faces were getting the shit beat out of them. But then you got to see the evil heels star time, and then the baby faces would beat the shit out of the heels. But the times I had there with the combination of the guys, Stu Hart and his family, the traveling there, the great buffets they got there, the rats on the side, the TV, working out at BJ's gym, so much fucking fun. Calgary was the greatest territory, the most fun I'd ever had in the professional wrestling business. All these other places I had were all great. I never had a bad time, but working for Stu Hart was special. Working for Stu Hart was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But then again, after I left, I did come back. As soon as I got back from the Maritimes, I went back there till Christmas. Because the next year I was going to Puerto Rico. But Stu Hart's Calgary wrestling was the most fun I'd ever had at any time in my life as a pro wrestler. So when you hear somebody talk about Calgary, you can bet your life, you can bet your sweet bippy that Calgary was a great place, nothing but good times, and you can just see and hear Stu Hart. You did a good job for me, Ripley. Thank you very much.
I said, are you ready? I got my dots on, my polka dots. Get your popcorn, get your Coke, get ready, get excited because look what's coming up now.